Well, tonight it is all about the law. New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez late this afternoon formally indicted. We will explain both the charges and what the senator is saying about them. And now both Arkansas and Indiana are working to try to fix religious freedom laws. You heard quite a bit about that in the past week, haven't we? That have just been passed by their lawmaking bodies. But the question remains, and we'll discuss whether these laws discriminate against gay people and if religious freedom, which should trump what. Then this Connecticut teenager using the insanity defense in his murder trial. Now, many people think that if you go that route, you could be getting off easy. We're going to distinguish rhetoric from reality tonight. Ominous music. And a good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We will begin with the news that came down late this afternoon. The indictment handed down, as I said, just a couple of hours ago against Senator Robert Menendez, the senior senator, Democrat from New Jersey. Now, he is facing 14 federal corruption charges, including bribery, conspiracy, making a false statement, and violating the Travel Act. The charges, they stem from the senator's relationship with Florida eye doctor Solomon Melgen. Melgen, a longtime friend of the senator's dating back to the early 90s, but allegations in the indictment say that Menendez accepted close to $1 million worth of gifts and campaign contributions from Melgen, and in return, the senator used his power to influence the outcome of Medicare billing disputes worth tens of millions of dollars to the doctor. Now, Menendez has always maintained his innocence in this case, and he's expected to speak at 7 p.m. To address these charges. We'll be carrying that live on Fios 1 New Jersey. Again, that will be coming up at the top of the hour. All right, I want to bring in our legal panel to get into this and many other issues. Jim Koutsouras, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Also a visiting professor at the University of Birmingham in England, and he likes to lecture us all here as well. And Doug Vallois, though, Doug does not take this sitting down. Not only a founding partner of Carson Vallois, focusing on criminal misconduct, but he one of the legal 500, a super attorney here, most influential trial lawyers in the nation, Mayo Bartlett, the nice one of the group here, an attorney at the law office of the Mayo Bartlett PLLC and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office, and as you've seen him involved in many high-profile cases, and the brains of this operation, Susan Wolf, criminal defense attorney at Blank and Rome, and she has to deal with Mark Furnish continuously, so she gets an extra badge of courage for that. All right, thank you all for joining us, and I'm going to start with you, Jim. With the charges that came down late today, and I know the political components to this, but let's set a little bit of a backdrop. This has been a long time coming. For 2 years, the feds have been involved in this investigation. The Menendez team, not only were they knew this was coming down, they were directly involved with the AG's office trying to convince him to drop the charges. This has been going on for a while. This isn't coming out of nowhere, but still, only the second time in the last 20 years a U.S. senator a sitting U.S. senator has been facing indictment. Take us behind the scenes a little bit. What's been going on? Because you've been involved with other cases involving the feds.
It's very difficult to prosecute a sitting lawmaker. You have evidence gathering issues in terms of privileged information. You have something called the speech and debate clause, which protects certain communications and certain evidence from them getting their hands on it. And so what's been going on for the last 2 years is they have been trying desperately to get this benefactor to turn and flip against the senator, because that would be their smoking gun. The evidence from a documentary standpoint, from a benefit standpoint, there's no question that the senator received gifts. He's admitted it. He paid back $58,000 for plane trips. And so there's no question of that. And there's also no question that he intervened on behalf of this benefactor, and the benefactor received millions of dollars in Medicaid benefits, as well as I think there was a port deal in the Dominican Republic.
In the Dominican Republic, there was a security port deal of which he wanted to get the contract. But Doug, as I understand it, first of all, we know this much. The senator, and you see some of the charges facing him, and I should mention, he's a good friend to the program. He will not go quietly in the good night. He's already said that he will fight this tooth and nail. He will not even temporarily step down. I'll get into politics in a second. These are hard to prove because the senator has said on record, Yeah, I made an oversight. I took the plain gifts. I should have recognized them more thoroughly than I did, and I paid it back. I made restitution. But he'll say he believed it was in the best interest because it was equity that he was arguing for the Medicaid billing. He said it was a better practice than what was on the books. He said this guy was a good actor and would do a good job if he got a government contract. Now, whether or not there was an implicit quid pro quo, he gave him $700,000 between the senator and other Democrats in New Jersey, and as a result here, the senator obviously at least spoke up on his behalf. To prove that that's corruption or bribery versus advocating for a constituent or for a fellow American, that's hard to prove, isn't it?
It's absolutely hard to prove. And you mentioned that he's the second sitting senator to be indicted. Well, the other one, his charges were eventually thrown out. Right. And I know that the Supreme Court actually addressed the honest services statute later on, but it's obviously a very difficult thing to prove and a tricky statute.
Susan, in terms of what we should read into that this was a 2-year investigation, and I think Jimmy laid it out well. They were trying to get Menendez to flip, and he obviously didn't, but they still brought the charges. What does that tell us here? Because they had a lot of opportunities to stand down. And if my world's the world of politics, you got the Democratic Attorney General, obviously in Democratic administration, and a sitting U.S. Senator who's, by the way, the ranking member on the Foreign Relations Committee. I wouldn't think they'd bring these charges unless there's a lot of bad blood going on. There's some that I know of at least, but more that they thought they really had a case, right?
Well, the first thing we shouldn't do is read anything into the fact that it took 2 years, because the statute of limitations in this case is 5 years. So the government had 5 years to investigate to their heart's content and bring the charges, and they did it in 2 years, and that's not atypical. Sometimes they go to the wire. There's been a lot of suggestion that there's political retaliation for criticism that Senator Menendez has had of the Obama administration. And you mentioned that, what's going on behind the scenes. The interesting thing is that there's not a lot here that's behind the scenes, because this investigation, every time something comes up about Menendez, it's been reported. There's been reporting about the relationship with Menendez, reporting about supposed prostitutes, which were a setup. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot behind the scenes here.
Mayor, in terms of timeline, if anybody thinks this thing's going to be figured out in the next few weeks or month, they're kidding themselves here, right? I mean, this thing could slow play this. They could go beyond a year, right?
Oh, easily. It could easily. Just based on the sheer volume of documents that are involved, you're going to have e-discovery experts. Definitely on the defense side, they're going to be looking into whether documents have been altered. You'll probably have hundreds of boxes of evidence. We don't know how many actual witnesses you'll have who will be coming forward. But I think one of the biggest issues is that your point was 100% right on track. How do you know that somebody is getting a bribe as opposed to getting a contract that they are qualified for? And that's why you have to take the money out of politics altogether, because if we had a real clean system, nobody's giving money to the senator. So if you get the contract, presumably it's because you're the best vendor. Right now we're in a position where you really don't know, and it's always going to be suspect. And you can look at any senator and say that.
There'll be arguments, too, to say, listen, at the end he could advocate, but he's not the one awarding the contracts, the senator, although obviously it's an influential call. Listen, when you were at the Westchester DA's office, politics always get involved, right? So my point, I guess my question is, for as public as this has been, and because Menendez, to our knowledge, has not flipped, and knowing the difficulties of it, to still bring the charges after, as I understand it, Senator Reid even spoke on the behalf of Senator Menendez. There's other. There has to be a little bit more going on here than meets the eye, right?
I tend to look at it this way. I tend to think that the fact that he's been indicted means that there probably, I would suspect, would be more evidence against him, because if it's simply going against someone who criticizes President Obama, all the senators would be indicted, right?
Well, and again here, in Washington, all things are political. There's a bunch of things of importance right now. Obviously, anyone following what's going on in the world, he's the ranking member on the Foreign Relations Committee. Also, Republicans have a self-imposed policy that if someone's under indictment, they have to leave a leadership position, not resign as a U.S. Senator, but step down from a leadership position. Democrats don't. Harry Reid, who's leaving anyway in a couple of years, said he doesn't see any reason why Menendez does. And then, remember, they're still trying to get an attorney general confirmed, and every Democratic vote is critical. So what about that? And would Menendez bear any ill will to Loretta Lynch because of what the current attorney general from the Obama administration is doing? So there's all this political byplay that's going on.
I just have to say this, though, and it's to Mayo's point. If it's going to be legal that somebody can give somebody $700,000 that's running for office, is anybody in that jury pool not going to expect that when that person needs a phone call made on his behalf, it's not going to be made? Nobody's addressing what I think is really, as Mayo
It's
said,
the mother's
more of the
milk
root
of
of the problem.
politics, and
That's
we know,
right,
and now
that's
it's
right.
even worse because it's in your world too, guys. Judges running for office, where are the donations coming from? The transparency or lack of. Companies now that Citizens United that can do this all under the cover of night. We don't know any better. Don't get Doug started
Very
on that
cynical,
one.
Rich.
Yes. Oh, Doug, get ready. All right. When we come back, though, the big legal issue that dominated the week here, and also it sparked moral and ethical debates. It started in Indiana, but now Arkansas as well. This has to do with the new Religious Freedom Act law and its applications. We are asking the question, do those laws give businesses a license to discriminate against gay people? And when is it legal, actually in this country, to legally discriminate? We'll get into that as well. Stay with us.